I'm making the assumption mine is the longest presentation.
Okay.
I don't know that for a fact.
Never know. Thank you, Chief. Okay, it's now 5 p.m. We'll call the Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee to order on May the 11th at 5 p.m. We have our committee member, Councilmember Greg Baruso, is with us. Councilmember Lydia Sevadawson is joining us by audio. Good. Thank you, Lydia. Councilmember Sevadawson is the other member of our committee. And then we are joined by Council President Susan Honda and Councilmember Leandra Kraft. So we'll begin with the first item on the agenda.
Sir Coachmar?
Which is, yes.
I'd like to amend our agenda to add an item.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item F would be Chief Wong and Police Accountability Report, I believe he called it.
Thank you. And I'll second that. So we're adding as item F a presentation by Chief Wong on police accountability, police reform and accountability presentation. Right. Thank you. So Lydia, did you hear that, Councilmember Sevadawson?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. So, Chief, you're on at the end of our agenda. So, we'll now go into public comment. Ms. Janicki, do we have any public comment?
I received notice that Jesse Johnson was going to provide public comment, but I don't see him on here.
Okay. All right. Oh, so if he joins us at a later date, Representative Johnson, we'll just add him on in. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So now we're moving on to committee business. Item A, approval of the April 13th, 2021 minutes.
Sir Coachmar, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from April 13th, 2021.
Thank you.
I'll second.
And it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item B, ordinance, FWRC, Chapter 4.05, Park Regulations Updates. Mr. Gerwin.
Hi, thank you, Chair Coachmar, and thank you, council members. Kind of the policy question we have before you is, should the City Council approve the proposed ordinance, which updates and modifies and amends Chapter 4.05 of the Park Code? And so I did provide a staff memo with that kind of outlined the details and the time frame that we took to make those updates. Originally began in 2019, and the Parks Commission met on 5 different occasions. Looking at things, basically a lot of it's housekeeping, and it had been over 15 years since it had been reviewed. And so there were new things that are out there, such as drones and different items that just kind of needed to be updated, kind of freshened up, and, make it a little bit more easily readable for the lay person. So that happened in 2019. And then in January 2020, we were all set to bring it for approval when we started having some problems with motorized vehicles on trails. And so we worked hand in hand with police to modify that language and get those changes made. Then 2 months later, we were hit by COVID, and COVID really took all of Parks and Facilities focus. And so we're just now able to get these prepared and bring them to you for review and approval. And so with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Council, are there any questions?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? So the thing talks about motorized vehicles and all these different mode of transportation or ways. And one of them talks about wheelchairs are so accessible, and it says it does not include. What does that exactly mean? I didn't understand it. I'm just asking for clarification, how those are different. Or there was like something about, what is it, Schedule 1 or 2, different ways of describing what all those vehicles or mode of transportation were. Could you please tell me what that is?
Yeah, and so essentially, you've got a new generation of bicycles that are out there, and they're called e-bikes or motorized bikes. And the BPA trail was partially funded with transportation dollars as a non-motorized transportation route. And so, with that being said, these e-bikes were not out there beforehand, and we do have a certain obligation to allow for e-bikes to be there because it is a non-motorized transportation lane. But we also want to, take care with pedestrians and the like. And so we really worked heavily with former Assistant City Attorney Dell. And he provided us that guidance. He had some background in history in it, in addition to with police. When it comes to the accessibility and mobility type vehicles, there are no restrictions. Anything that will help with people that have needs, accessibility needs, they are absolutely permitted on the trail. And generally those type of apparatus aren't going or creating the speeds that some of these e-bikes may be reaching. And so, we do have a speed limit on the trail, which is 15 miles an hour.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sevadasan. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Council President, go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead.
That's okay. I'm waiting.
Okay. So on the BPA trail, when you hear vehicles back there, usually bikes, electric bikes and motorcycles and stuff, what is someone supposed to do about that? I mean, you can't call, it's really not an emergency. Do the police patrol the BPA trail?
The police do patrol the BPA trail. The concern that police had is our park code didn't have the teeth in it for them to really be able to enforce. And like I say, in the past year and during the pandemic, we have seen increased motorcycles, four-wheelers, and that's a motorized vehicle, and that's not permitted on the trail. But an e-bike that is not, the difference is kind of combustible engine, I think would be the difference versus kind of these battery operated e-bikes. And so, motorized vehicles aren't there, but the previous language didn't have the teeth for police to fully enforce. And so we worked heavily with Casey Jones and Kyle Sumner to dial that in and get them the language they needed to be able to enforce. And, I'm hoping that we will see this increased enforcement once this gets passed, because, like I say, we do experience, and it's been increasing since the pandemic, these motorized vehicles out there on the trail. The hard thing for police, though, is they could be in my backyard and tearing it up on the trail, being unsafe, but the neighbor calls, and police have to get there, and a lot of times by the police have gotten to that location, that motorbike or four-wheeler is ripped on down and is somewhere else. And so police always gives us great support, and that's going to continue once these teeth get here. It's just once we're able to catch some of these folks, then word's going to get out, and that's going to stop things, I think, pretty quickly.
Okay. What about drug use? So we don't like it in parks. We don't like it anywhere. But is that, will this be able to enforce drug use in parks?
And I'm trying to pull it up because I've read this so many times that I'm almost too familiar with it that
it's on page 8.
Okay.
Page 8.
And so I just want to glance at it so I can reference to you specifically. I found it.
It's section 4.05.145.
145. Okay. Yeah, and so there's a delicate balance here with drug use, and I can tell you that was the Parks Commission and the initial reviews and that they were interested in addressing homelessness, and the thing that we have to be very careful with here in the city is that it's not a crime to be homeless. And the problem is a lot of times drug use and homelessness are intertwined, and so basically we've got it. I want to read you what's here, or you can read what's here. But drug use is prohibited, and so they shouldn't possess, consume by mouth, inject, inhale a controlled substance. Try to sell, distribute, or cultivate it in a park, and it's a violation and subject to the RCW. And so that was the cleanest way between what kind of the Parks Commission staff wanted, but in legal terms, what is truly enforceable, and it's just straight drug use is prohibited. It's not allowed, and not specifically related to drug use, but we did make our kind of smoking policy a little bit more difficult and disallowed smoking away from kind of those congregation areas, especially where kids are, ball fields, the beaches, playgrounds, where previously the smoking only said has to be can't be done inside of a facility. It was really all our smoking policy said. So I know you asked about drug use, but that just kind of coincides with what I thought you were asking, Susan. But yeah, plain and simple, it's prohibited. And if parks maintenance does not have any enforcement responsibility, we would rely on police for that. And when we do see it, or know of it going on, maybe in a locked bathroom or something, our staff does call police responds and removes the individuals. And just depending on the other circumstances is how all that unfolds. Each situation is different, though.
So with smoking, I think it was 2 years ago, probably, at the Seattle King County Board of Health, we voted to ban smoking in King County parks. And that had actually come to us from the Mariners, because they wanted to be able to ban smoking in the Mariners field. But I know that there are some cities that also ban smoking completely in parks. But that's not something that...
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Susan.
Oh, that's okay. The Parks Commission didn't want to do that here?
Well, the Parks Commission concern was that, it's a legal activity, and military, we have a large military population or been involved in, and their thought was that there tend to be a lot of smokers in that demographic. And so they didn't want to flat outlaw smoking completely for illegal activity, but they did feel strongly that it shouldn't be around areas or where people congregate, or definitely where kids are, activities that way. Now, if the council would like to see differently, that is certainly an option.
Sorry to butt in, but on page 14 of the packet, it does say expulsion from parks using tobacco products in an unauthorized area or facility. So that that would just mean expulsion, but not like a criminal conduct.
Correct. You would be what is termed trespassed from the park, and so your initial if you get trespassed from a park by police, your initial time is 7 days. You're not allowed to re-enter the park. The second time, I believe, is 30 days, and then the subsequent third is 1 year expulsion. And we do have several 1 year expulsions out there currently, and a lot of that resolves around homeless camps.
Well, it is something I'd like to eventually look at, just banning smoking completely in public parks. It would fit into what King County is doing in several cities in King County, pass their own ordinances against smoking. So
sure. Yeah.
Eventually.
I'm not opposed to it by any means. I've just felt like we had to find some consensus, and that was a good common ground that we were able to find in this review.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Susan.
I think Councilmember Barroso had his hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Chair Couture. Jason, just remind me, but how much signage do we have on the trails and things like that about any ordinances or the rules we have in there?
And so pretty much all of our parks and what we deem as trailheads have a park entrance sign. Well, it's not, there's two kinds of signs. There's the monument sign with the park name, and that just identifies the park. But then we have our rule signs out, and there's there's our main rule sign, and then individual parks have an emphasis one for specific rules to that park. But along the BPA trail, it crosses on 325th and 10th and 1st Avenue. And at every one of those kind of entrances, there is a sign holder with an arch top sign, and it lists our rules. Now, we can't list everything in this park code.
Right.
We try to hit the highlights on that generally. And then we have 5 emblems on the bottom that are kind of the universal symbols for, put your trash in the trash can, those sorts of things. And then we refer to chapter 4.05 for the full rules. And so park patrons, they're responsible to know the rules, and they have an obligation to know the rules, regardless if they're posted or not. But generally, I try to err on the side of sign. I don't like sign pollution because I want to see our parks, but where it makes sense, we've got them, and I venture to say we have over 120, 130 rule signs out there, because you think most parks, like a neighborhood park, usually has 2 entrances, one from this side and one from this side. And so each side of those parks has a trail. And like I say, along the BPA, anywhere there's a little neighborhood access into it, it's got a sign holder and the rules. And so we try to focus on those entry points. And so pretty much almost every entry point has a rule sign on it.
Okay.
Did that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we've been joined by Councilmember Moore. Welcome. Councilmember Kraft, I believe you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Chair Coach Martin, and thank you for letting me butt in. I just wanted to clarify earlier, so I appreciate that. Jason, on page 14 of the packet, it's under the expulsion of parks, 4.05.050, under 1B, it says, directing ethnic slurs or offensive remarks at any other person based on such person's actual or perceived race or ethnic group, nationality, religion, disability, sex, or sexual orientation. Is there a reason why we decided to use the term ethnic slurs rather than something along the lines of derogatory remarks? Because, or derogatory bias remarks, since that would be more encompassing? Because we didn't define, I couldn't find the definition of slurs in this ordinance under the definition portion, but I definitely could have missed it.
Yeah, and why that exact language was used, Councilmember Kraft, I can't remember exactly. It was probably a homogenization of the existing language that was there, and well, actually, if you look at the document, it doesn't look like anything has changed on this one, and so it may just be like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. This has not been updated in over 15 years, and so it's pretty outdated language. And as I'm looking at the strikeout line-out version of this document, there was no changes made to that. So that may just be old language that, based on your comment, we may want to amend and update for the final draft.
Okay, great. Thank you. That helps. You answered my question. Thank you.
But I have an additional question. Is that something that you would like to see changed as a part of this approval process?
I do think that changing the term from ethnic slurs or offensive remarks to something along the lines of biased derogatory remarks is more all-encompassing. But I would defer to City Attorney Ryan Call on what he thinks is the most appropriate for a city ordinance.
Okay. And sorry.
So Jason, this actually was changed. The word slur was inserted by Mr. Cole before it said ethnic or offensive remarks. I think the idea here is that type A is just generic abusive language, like combative, fight-inducing language. B, I think the intent here is to call out specifically, racial stuff, race and sex and religion. So I think we wanted to emphasize that it was the intent here. So
Understood.
Generally speaking, if someone's using fighting language, we'll kick them out of the park.
Okay.
But this is meant to emphasize that race-based or any protected class is not to be criticized in the park.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Ryan.
you. Councilmember Sepa Dawson.
Thank you, Chair Coach Mar. Let me start by saying I am at a clinic, so I'm going to be in and out. And so I hope you understand if I don't respond. But thank you, Councilmember Craft, for asking that question. And I think when it says ethnic, I don't know if it encompasses or includes LGBTQ, but again, you guys have agreed, so I'm okay. My question is, I wanted to go back to smoking. And I don't think we should ban it completely, especially when it comes to people who are experiencing homelessness and they don't have a place to go. But I would agree to have a designated area within the park that people could smoke. So I would rather see that happen than completely banning smoking cigarettes from the park. So that's my comment. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Sepa Dawson. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to move the ordinance to the next council meeting?
Chair Coachmar, I make the motion.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I'll second.
I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on May 18th, 2021. Council.
Thank you. And it's been seconded by Councilmember Sepa Dawson. All in favor? Please
Aye.
signify by voting aye. Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Gerwin.
Thank you, council members. Have a great evening.
You too. So now we're moving on to item C, ordinance to regulate racing, stunting, and unlawful race attendance. Commander Bunk, thank you.
There we go. I think I'm finally up. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, council members, for your time this evening. This is in direct relation to the constant stunt driving and unlawful race attendance that we've seen in our area. In 2019, we had approximately 102 calls for service into 911 reporting racing and stunting. In 2020, the number more than doubled to 224. And I will assure you that number is well over 300 as I gave out my work cell phone to certain members of the community so we didn't have to bog down 911. As seen in the park and ride at 323rd, about 323rd over there by the mall, as well as several other areas to include around 320th and Weyerhaeuser, where our officers were surrounded at one point while these individuals with very nice cars do the drifting and the spinning around. It's an extremely dangerous thing. Currently, we have RCWs as far as reckless driving, et cetera, that we can do here in the state of Washington. But between myself and Lieutenant Cruzy, we wanted to put a little more teeth to this and adopt and expand from some of the other jurisdiction around us to make the stunt driving, the racing, as well as knowingly attending these events illegal. Probably the biggest teeth in the entire thing is we'll impound the cars of those that are attending these events. And the overall intent of it is once we impound their car, there's a $100 administrative fee assigned by the federal way courts, as well as the impound fees that hopefully they will decide to go into another jurisdiction to complete their issues. The unlawful attendance of the individuals will be considered a misdemeanor through our Federal Way Municipal Code, as well as the, and again, when I say racing, I'm just going to put that combined with unlawful stunt driving, which is probably the biggest problem. As council members have seen, we have received numerous emails from concerned citizens of people with the extremely loud exhausts. And again, 323rd Park and Ride was probably the biggest example that we had in 2020 that I was able to shut down right next to a bunch of retired folks. And they were going at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, keeping our elderly community up. And that was the catalyst in this is much like Jason said with the other law, just one more tooth in our bite that, again, hopefully these folks will decide to go somewhere else and do their really cool stunt racing with their really nice cars up in Kent or in another jurisdiction. Are there any questions?
Council, well, I wonder if Kent Would appreciate that, but thank you, Commander. Council, are there? Oh, I see we have some questions. Councilmember Kraft.
Thank you, Chair Coach Mar. Thank you for the presentation, Ray. My question is, when you have gone to these calls, does it appear that the majority of the population there are, I imagine that most of the people in attendance are younger. Is that accurate, or is that an incorrect assumption?
Now that I'm going to be 49 here in a couple weeks, younger is kind of a relative. But I would say your mid 30s lower. I would argue that 95% of the people that attend these races are not from the city of Federal Way.
Mm-hmm.
A good majority of them were coming from Joint Base Lewis McChord and the other bases around, but due to an extreme joint operation that we ran, not only with the U.S. Marshals and with all the police officers in the different branches, as well as county with Pierce and King and state and us, we were able to quash the JBLM side of the house. The colonels down here there have the ability to lock you down on your base without any real trial. So we hit them first to try to get them to go away. And although our numbers have gone down, only 64 calls so far this year. They still are attending, but ages range easy from 16-year-olds up to the mid 30s. And a lot of them are these really cool cars for kids from Redmond that are 16 years old. And I mean, they're very nice cars, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 vehicles.
Wow.
We don't want to bother our folks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just want to make a comment that I do strongly believe that racing and some of this stunt driving is really dangerous for our public. And I support this. I would hope that our city attorney's office, for obviously people who are in attendance and have no prior criminal history, could think about alternatives to this proceeding. And I'm sure that our city attorney will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Council President Honda had her hand up next.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, there I am. So if you got a call that there is people gathering with cars in a location, how many officers do you need to send to that location so that you're not overwhelmed and you're able to stop the activity?
Ma'am, with some of the groups that we've had this year, especially the takeovers is what the racing groups like to call it, where they've taken over the Seattle Tunnel, where they've taken over the 167, where they've taken over Weyerhaeuser. On a graveyard night, we could have a minimum of 7 officers, but there's hundreds, literally hundreds of individuals and their vehicles out there. Our hope is to catch, for lack of a better term, the low-hanging fruit, impound their vehicle, which may cost them a little bit on the monetary side, and then they won't return to our jurisdiction. But there's times that we are totally overwhelmed.
So would the Auburn police or Kent police or other jurisdictions come and help if you called, or because they could just easily move down to Auburn or somewhere else too?
Yes, and we've done several joint operations, especially with Kent. Kent seems to be getting hit a little bit harder than us around the Dix Drive-in area. Auburn, not so much. Fife gets hammered pretty well. So, again, we've had that big collaboration with all the different, from federal all the way down to municipal, that we've been able to work together. But if we were being attacked, much like seen in Tacoma when that officer was surrounded and the windows were being busted out, yes, we do have the ability to notify Valleycom for a multi-jurisdictional response.
Okay, thank you. Maybe it's a good thing we didn't get Dixon Federal Way then.
No. Thank you. Thank you, Council President. So, Councilmember Moore, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Chair Coach Mara. This is just a comment, and I just want to say, Ray, thank you for your efforts and work on this. I've heard a lot from constituents on social media platforms about racing and how they're hearing it all the time. So I'm just glad that there's a solution coming forth, and I fully support this. So I'm glad we're doing this, and I hope that our residents hear that we're taking action and finding solutions to cut down on racing in Federal Way. So just wanted to say thank you.
So, Commander, can you tell me why they're picking our park and ride?
It's a really cool, wide open area with no Jersey barriers or those parking lots. It's a wonderful place to drift. And that's when I worked with King County Metro to get, if you go up to the 323 park and ride, you'll see the big Jersey barriers. But it was just beautifully wide open, and King County took such great care of it with the perfect asphalt. It's really a great place to drift and to race. If you go down to Fife and you go down to their I was going to say their factories. That's not the word I want to use. But down to their storage areas, same thing. These wide open parking lots is a wonderful place to drift your vehicle.
You know, it would appear to me that if I had up to $100,000 vehicle, I'd be taking better care of it than that. Unless it's not owned by them, but by Daddy. But at any rate, I'm sorry.
Using the Redmond kid that I stopped initially, he was a 16-year-old under Mommy and Daddy's name out of Redmond, but yeah, I bought my kid not an $80,000 car, and she didn't do that.
Yeah. My kid was lucky if they had anything above a bicycle, but they had to agree to pay for part of that car if they were going to be driving it. Well, anyway, thank you. I'm old school. Is there a motion?
Chair Kirschmar, I make the motion.
Thank you.
I move to forward the proposed ordinance first reading on May 18th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, I'll second that. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe that Councilmember Sefa Dawson was otherwise occupied at the clinic, so we'll go ahead with that. I don't believe she was able to vote on this particular item. The next item on the agenda, thank you very much, Commander Bunk, if you're still there. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Commander Wong, item D, Valley Communications Service Level Agreement for Emergency Communication Services.
Committee Chair Kochmar, Council President Hunda, members of the council, good to be with all of you this evening. We are seeking committee and council approval to enter into a service level agreement for emergency communication services with Valleycom. Valleycom provides services for police and fire and various agencies in the region. It is one of the largest dispatch centers in the state of Washington. Why this contract is necessary is that the needs of fire and police are different, and Valleycom provided a certain level of scope of work for a fee, and they charge a fee for every call for service. And it's a different cost for calls for service, police versus fire. So, and then because the fire needs are different than police, sometimes they have requests for projects and enhancements and so forth. It became necessary that there would be some sort of an agreement such as this, so that people or each agency knew what service that you would receive for the price that you would pay. And if you want to have extra services, then you've got to pay for it. So this what the contract does is it really outlines what services are provided, what the fees are, and you'll pay more if you want more. Bottom line is the police chiefs and the sheriffs, police chiefs and the fire chiefs agreed to this agreement, and the city managers and the mayors of each city have agreed to this as well. So now we're coming to you to seek authorization to sign it. There is no financial impact. And as an owner city to Valleycom, we're one of 5 agencies that actually own Valleycom. We get a discount rate for every call for service. And I think this is one of the models that actually, it's a success story, that it's really worked well for us and other agencies. So at this point, that's what that is, and we're asking for your approval to move forward with it.
Council members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, do I hear a motion?
Chair Kirschmar, I make the motion.
Thank you, Greg. That would be
pretty easy one. It's a pretty easy one for this. This is really easy.
Right.
But, for Valleycom itself, working with them, but that's my comment.
Okay.
I move to forward proposed agreement to the May 18th, 2021 Council consent agenda for approval.
Thank you very much. I'll second that. I don't hear Councilmember Sapadawson on the call yet. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And Councilmember Sapadawson is excused. So we'll move forward to the next item on the agenda, which is the Federal Community Center slide update. John Hutton. John, you're on mute.
You just missed a brilliant introduction too. Thank you, Chair Koshmar, Council President Honda, and members of the committee. I just have a very brief update. Actually, it's no update from the last time. We are in process of preparing the bid docs. The bid docs are out. We're waiting for those bids to come in on the new slide. As I told you at our last meeting, the cost of that slide could be in excess of $500,000. Good news is we did hear back from the King County grant regarding the aquatics facilities grant, and we should be eligible for $250,000 of that. And we're researching every other grant that we can come up with to drop that. And I'll be meeting with Finance Director Ade Arawula very shortly to figure out how we're going to come up with any other potential shortfall. But we want to know what we're chasing before I freak Ade out too much and tell him how much I need. So
Okay.
yeah. So at any rate, that's my only update unless you have questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, do we have any questions? John, do you have a ETA for when that slide might be finalized and installed?
As soon as humanly possible. We know that that's a major draw to the community center, and the community center is doing really well, but that is a big separator for that facility versus every other facility in the area. So we want to get that up and running as quickly as possible, and the mayor has expressed that as well. So as quick as we possibly can.
Thank you very much, John.
These projects take a lot of time. So you're welcome.
Oh, thank you. By the way, Brian, since you're on the agenda on the call, Councilmember Sapadawson says she is now back unable to vote. Can she go ahead and vote late on the other two items that she missed? Ryan, you're frozen. Ryan?
Ryan, can you hear?
Ryan? Can you hear me? I think he's, tell you what, Councilmember Sapadawson, Ryan, can you hear us yet? No. Well, Councilmember Sapadawson, why don't you go ahead and we'll just accept your yes vote go ahead and let us know that you want to vote yes on the item C and D. Okay?
Yes, I'd like to vote yes on both. And I'm listening. They just keep coming in and out. So that's why I can't talk.
All right.
But I'm paying attention. So
I'm assuming that it's appropriate. So we'll just go ahead and accept that and move forward.
Thank you so much.
And Ryan can check on that later. Okay. So moving forward, thank you very much. So now we're moving forward to item F, the one that's been added. And the item F is the Chief Wong is going to talk about a presentation on excuse me. Before we go to that, I'd just like to say, Chief Wong, this is National Police Appreciation Week. And so thank you. Thank you for all your service. And thank you to our police department for your service. So moving forward to item F, police reform and accountability presentation. Chief Wong.
Chair Kochmar?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I interrupt real quick? Representative Jesse Johnson is on and
good.
He wanted to provide public comment. Do you want him to
of
wait
course,
till after?
No, we'll have him first.
presentation?
Yeah, well, let's have him first. Okay, normally the public comment would come first.
Yeah, and I just lost.
Should be just working now, right?
I just lost him.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mary, we'll just go ahead with the presentation and you try to get him back, okay?
Yeah, I think the chief needs to minimize his screen because I can't.
Okay.
I can't see my panel anymore. There we go. Okay, he's been unmuted.
Okay. Representative Johnson, go ahead, please.
Yes, I am here.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chair Kochmar, and for members of the council for having me on short notice. For the record, my name is Jesse Johnson, representative for the 30th. And I just wanted to briefly provide some quick comments. I know that the chief will go over the idea of a community accountability or oversight board. We had a bill this year that I sponsored, House Bill 1203, that actually made it through committee, and we decided not to move forward with this bill this year. But this bill would have required all local jurisdictions with departments of 15 officers or more to have a community oversight board, and we would have established a framework for the operations for the board, which would include the board have access to all public complaints that would be filed against officers. They would also be able to review those complaints, issue subpoenas to review the complaints, and basically work with the department to conduct an internal investigation of what the complaint is. And the reason we decided to go this route is because the U.S. Department of Justice released data that said only 1 in 12 public complaints that are issued by community are usually typically actually pursued by the local department, basically because they don't have time, they don't have the resources, or other reasons. So we wanted to establish this across the state. The community groups that I was working with, including the Federal Way Black Collective, Washington for Black Lives, King County Equity Now, and a number of others, decided they wanted a mandate. And because of that decision to go for a mandate, we decided to hold off to work on this bill more in the interim, but we will be bringing this bill back next year. I would definitely advocate for community oversight boards because I think they provide a voice for community members to have some kind of say in their local policing. I also know that police are more likely to do the right thing when they know that the community has some type of representation. And I think it'll lead to better outcomes and policies and avoid adverse incidents between law enforcement and community. The last thing I'll say is this process that we established for policing bills this year was with community across the state of Washington. And we know because of the public murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and here locally in Tacoma with Manny Ellis, that these are really sensitive issues. And so I understand that there's, a sense of if we're doing something, there has to be something wrong. But I don't think that's the case. I think that doing something is proactive and it's not just being reactive. And that's what this is about. And I think that this is going to have a very positive impact on our community to establish this. We're also in the top 10 cities in terms of population in the state of Washington. Federal Way is number 8 biggest city overall. And so every city ahead of us either has a board or is considering a board. And so I think it's just being proactive and taking a step in the right direction to show that we support our community and we want to have a positive impact.
Representative Johnson, we've lost you.
I can hear him, Chair Coach Mar.
I'm still on.
So,
you all hear me?
well,
Yes.
no, now we can, but we lost you there for a while.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. So I'll just repeat the last 10 seconds of what I said. So we are number 8 in terms of population in the state. And so the top 4 cities in terms of population, Seattle, Spokane, Tacoma, and Vancouver already have police oversight boards. The other 3 ahead of us, Renton, Bellevue, and Kent, are considering an oversight board. So I think we're just being proactive by having this discussion and considering it because that's the steps that folks are taking across the state of Washington. But I'll just end with that and happy to answer any questions.
Council, are there any questions for Representative Johnson? So Representative Johnson, I don't think we're talking about the oversight board question tonight. We're talking about the mandates that came down from the legislature. I think that's what the presentation is on. You're welcome to stay and listen to the presentation.
Yes, absolutely. I'll stay and listen, and
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Representative. Okay. So Chief Wong, are you there? So we're now back to your presentation, Chief.
Okay, can everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Great. There's been tremendous amount of changes that are coming to policing in Washington. I will be sharing with you the mandatory police reform bills that are waiting for governor's signature. In addition, I'll be sharing the police accountability measures that are currently in place for our community and the next steps moving forward. I want to briefly share with you about our national accreditation from CLIA. That's Commission on Accreditation for a Law Enforcement Agency. And I will speak in terms of addressing some of the accountability measures that we have in our community. I'll share with you our use of force numbers, and then our annual mandatory training and semi-annual training. I'll share briefly some information with you about that. I will go over 12 of the new police reform laws that are coming to our state. And then I'll share with you our Chief's Call advisory group. It works a little different than most, but nevertheless, for cities that have advisory group, we do have it, but it looks a little different in our community. The last is Path Forward for Federal Way PD. What I believe as a police department, the steps that we need to take to continue to advance our police services and serving our residents. I did send you all this presentation by email, so you do not need to write any notes on the content, but if you're, as we work through this, if you want to write your questions down, that would be great. And what I'd like to do is maybe after each area, I'll just stop and see if there's any questions before moving on to the next topic. And I will cover the material rather quickly because there's a lot of slides here, but I think I could cover it, not going into every detail, but I sent you the document so you can read it more probably at a later time if you haven't had a chance to review it. As far as national accreditation, there's almost 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the state, in this country. 3.5% are nationally accredited by CLIA. CLIA is the most prestigious accreditation organization for law enforcement. In the state of Washington, there are 281 incorporated municipalities, 31 counties, and 1 state police agency. And of all those agencies, 8 agencies in the state of Washington are nationally accredited. So we are one of those 8 agencies. And I would tell you the process of being nationally accredited is rigorous. We are up for reaccreditation this year, so we will have an on-site reaccreditation auditing process that will take place in August. There are 53 agencies in the state of Washington that are state accredited through WASPIC. And I would tell you nationally and at the state level, there's encouragement to become accredited to elevate the professionalism of policing. And you will see more agencies becoming accredited moving forward as part of the police reform. As I stated earlier, we have an audit process, and CLIA will send third-party professionals to ensure that our practice and our policies are up to date and that we actually practice what we say we do within the organization. CLIA establishes the best practice in the field of law enforcement. And I'll tell you that it enhances the morale of the agency because when you're a CLIA accredited agency, that just comes along with high level of training that we need to provide to our staff, much greater than what's required by the state minimum training requirements for police officers. Accreditation embodies the community-oriented policing, and we know that without the community support, that we're not going to be successful as a police organization. So we have to work with our residents. We're very proud of this particular achievement. We know that being CLIA accredited is the highest level of service. It'll provide the highest level of service to our citizens. it's important for council and our residents to know that we have very high standards here in Federal Way at the police department. Okay, I want to talk about any questions about CALEA? That's something all of you really should be proud of. It's a significant investment. It does take time and money, but we really believe that our citizens are much better served by a nationally accredited police organization.
Thank you, Chief Wong. We're very proud of that. Council, if you have any questions, please speak up, because I see Martin Moore has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, Chief, could we get an email of what the training specifically looks like under CALEA?
Sure, it'll be in the upcoming slides. You bet.
Oh, will it? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. This is Susan Honda. How many years has our department been accredited by CALEA?
Since 2002.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we were last accredited 2017, and we also are gold standard within CALEA, and that's like maybe a handful of agencies within the national accreditation. So we meet the highest standards, and that was in 2017. We're also hoping to do that here in 2021. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will move on. In terms of use of force, as a Federal Way Police Department, we have about 75,000 calls for service and documented enforcement contacts as an agency. We typically have about 60 incidents where we end up using force. That's less than 1/10 of 1% of our contacts. And historically data, we're really proud of this, and we've been really, last 7 years since I've been the police chief here, we've been really doing reality-based. Academy calls it, academies providing that type of training. We've been doing this for many years, putting officers in a situation, stressful situation, so they'll most likely to perform well when they're under a lot of stress. So it's not a new concept, but we've been doing that for a number of years. We really believe that has made a tremendous difference. Of course, hiring the right people right people in the organization is also important. But bottom line is, from 2010 to 2013, we averaged 91 use of force per year. 2014 to 2017, that 4-year span, we averaged 68 use of force per year. And 2018 and 2020, 52 average use of force per year. So we really emphasize within our organization the minimal reliance, relying on minimum reliance when it comes to use of physical force. So here's our use of force numbers going back to 2009. We were over 100 use of force per year, 109, 105. And you can see 89, 90, we didn't really start tapering off. 2014, we start dropping down. And in 2020, we had 47 use of force. That's more than 50% less use of force incidents when you go back to 2010, 2009. So we really feel that we're on the right path of using less force within the agency. And that is largely in part because reality-based training, de-escalation skills, and so forth, and sharing our vision, value within our organization. So I think that's made a difference for us. Officer-involved shootings. We average 0.8 per year in terms of officer-involved shooting within our agency. Typically, so less than 1. So I want to share that information with you, that we don't have a lot of officer-involved shooting incidents within our PD. It mirrors, our use of force incidents. So here's our annual training. So when you're a CALEA accredited agency, there's various types of training. Obviously, there's state mandated training. We exceed far beyond that. One of the things that we do here at Federal Way PD is that when we hire a new person, every one of them meets with me, and we talk about our vision, mission, and our core values. And then they also hear from me every year. I meet with every single employee through 6 or 7 sessions generally. Again, re-emphasizing our vision, earning the public's trust. I think those discussions, along with other things our command staff and supervisory staff does, and hiring the right people into the organization, is created a healthy culture. And I think we provide exceptional service. And we do enjoy the support from our residents. I talked to a lot of residents, and I'm sure all of you have done, doorbelling or whatever you do. I think overall, people support the police here in Federal Way. If you have a different experience, let me know. But I live in this community. I go to a lot of meetings. I participate things with my kids. Maybe they tell me that because I'm the police chief. But overall, based on the emails, the contacts that we have and our people have, we really do enjoy the support from our residents. So that's our annual training. And then our semi-annual training, here's all the things that we provide semi-annually. And then, of course, specialized teams, detectives, they receive additional training. So we really invest in our people. You can match up our training, quality of our training with any other department. I can tell you, being nationally accredited, we provide some of the best training there is to our people. That's one of the keys to our success. Okay, so let's look at police reform bills. Maybe I'll spend a little more time with the first slide, but I will go over them pretty quickly. This House Bill 1054 on police tactics. One of the things prohibits use of chokehold or neck restraints. It's prohibited under any circumstances. On this particular one, the Police Chief Association did ask under deadly force situation that the officer be able to use some sort of neck restraint, but it was decided by the legislature that it would not be it would be prohibited under any circumstance. No knock warrant. We don't do that here in Federal Way. Previously, there's going to be a model policy regarding K9. I know the original bill eliminated the use of K9, but we're grateful that for now we can maybe create a model policy and keep our K9 partners tremendous in terms of effective policing and also protecting our officers. So we clearly would like to keep our K9s. Tear gas, CS or CN, we can use that for hostage or barricaded situation. For crowd control, we now need the highest public servant within our city approval for crowd control, and that would be Mayor Farrell. And then military equipment, we don't use military equipment within our agency. It's required that our people wear name tags. And then one of the big things here, really big change for policing here, is that vehicle pursuits. We allow vehicle pursuits for violent crimes, and we allow some level of discretion depending on the time of day. If it's 2, 3 early in the morning, we do allow certain times to allow pursuits. Last year, we had a total of 15 pursuits within our agency. So we had a pretty restrictive pursuit policy as it is. And what drives that is really liability. So we had a pretty restrictive policy. What's different now with this bill is that pursuits are pretty much prohibited. You have to have probable cause for a violent crime in order to pursue. And I would tell you that probable cause is a pretty high standard. When officers are responding to a violent crime, very unlikely they're going to have probable cause to arrest. So it'll essentially eliminate most pursuits throughout the state. And for DUIs, you can still pursue if you're, if you have reasonable suspicion. So reasonable suspicion is a standard that we had. Now it's moved up to probable cause standard. So reasonable standard, if there's still DUI, we can pursue. But one of the things that the police chief are worried about is that once the criminals find out that we won't chase them pretty much for most of the crimes under most circumstances, that we're worried that there are going to be times that we're going to have to let a criminal go that we really want to apprehend. And the last thing is we don't allow firing weapons into moving vehicles. So, but that's one of the things that'll be state law. You can't shoot at moving vehicles moving forward unless there's really exceptional circumstances. Okay, so that was, next bill is House Bill 1310. It's a use of force. Here, officers use force based on reasonable standard. Officers, reasonable standard, Graham versus Connor. It's a U.S. Supreme Court decision as to what is reasonable when you're using force. What's changing in our state is that now it requires officers to exhaust, available and appropriate de-escalation tactics, and we have to use the least amount of physical force necessary. It's really definition. Obviously, we want to de-escalate, use the minimum amount of force possible in a given situation. Operationally, I don't know that there will be that much change, but when there's controversial use of force incident or a shooting, I think the definition obviously is you're going to have other experts saying, hey, that is not the least amount of force, or you didn't exhaust all your options. So those will be the questions more probably for the courts. But day-to-day operation, obviously, we're going to continue to use least amount of force possible. That's one. And we don't want to use force at all, because obviously there's always consequences when you're taking people's liberty away or you're using force on another, human being. So we want to avoid that if we can. So that's House Bill 1310. Senate Bill 5051, decertification. What I would tell you with this bill is that the Washington Criminal Justice Training Commission will play a lot more, they'll be a lot more involved with police organizations. It'll be an agency that's going to be policing the police. They will be able to conduct independent investigations at their discretion. They may. So they may come to an organization and conduct investigations. There will be penalties for law enforcement agencies that don't comply with or failure to comply with all the CJTC requirements. You have to retain employees' records until they work here and 10 years thereafter. So retention will be much longer. And then, so what I would tell you is that CJTC is going to be hiring significant number of people. They have a lot more authority moving forward to ensure, discipline decisions. I would say that more officers will be decertified moving forward. Right, next is Senate Bill 5066, duty to intervene. This is already really within our policy. Of course, you want to intervene if there's excessive force and so forth. So this is really actually a good law. We're okay with that. I think there was trying to clarify, whether do you need to intervene if you're off duty, with your family? Is it only when you're working? Those kind of things were the questions that were really being raised by, law enforcement community. But in terms of duty to intervene, absolutely. We should do the right thing if somebody's using excessive force. Next one is House Bill 1267, Office of Independent Investigations. This is to address officer-involved shootings. Originally, I think this organization state agency would investigate all officer-involved shootings, but the way the law is drafted is that they may, investigate officer-involved shootings. So bottom line is, I'm sure the timeline for creating an agency like this may take a year and a half to 2 years before it's in place, before they can start responding to officer-involved shootings. So if we have an officer-involved shooting, we have to notify this agency, and they will let us know if they're going to respond or not respond. And if they're not going to respond, then we will have to have our own independent investigation team still conduct the investigation. So we will not be eliminating our Valley Independent Investigation Team. They'll still be in play because this agency will decide whether they're going to respond or not. Next reform bill is House Bill 1089, audits of investigations. So there'll be a state auditor with CJTC, and they're going to make sure that if we conduct any officer-involved independent investigations that are done, comply with all the rules and laws of conduct are following the Law Enforcement Training Community Safety Act. And they may also make sure that other investigations are done in accordance. So that's another check and balance, and they will be auditing police departments on any deadly use of force investigations. Next is Senate Bill 5476. This is the new drug law in response to State versus Blake. In this, it is going to be a simple misdemeanor, punishable by 90 days in jail or a $1,000 fine. What I would tell you is that if an officer encounters somebody with drugs, you have to refer that person, document it, and refer that person to treatment. And right now, this is really open-ended because there are no agency that's able to treat drug addicts, if people addicted to drugs, if we make an arrest at this point. So healthcare authority will establish that at some point, but there's nothing in place right now, a place we can take here in Federal Way. So we'll see what happens as this develops. But we have to give two essentially warnings, refer them to treatment. And on the third incident, if it's documented, you can make an arrest or take them to a treatment facility. And the law encourages prosecutors not to prosecute, but to divert them to treatment. So that's really the big change with this. I know our city ordinance will no longer be applicable. This law will go into effect as soon as the governor signs it, not July 1. Soon as it's signed by the governor, the law goes into effect. And if some communities have used drug paraphernalia for charging for drug offenses, this preempts that as well. You can't do that anymore either. So that's going to be a new drug law in this state. That's a pretty big change for this state, but that's coming here if the governor signs the bill. And then House Bill 1223, Uniform Electronic Recordation of Custodial Interrogations. If you're an adult, if we're investing in a felony crime, out in the field, at minimum, we have to do an audio recording. And if we're at a jail or police station, something like that, we have to do both audio and video for adults now. If it's a juvenile, all crimes, we have to audio record, or at the station, video and audio. This, looking at this bill, there is no way an officer can effectively do his or her job without body-worn cameras. I know some have said, well, just use a cell phone or, recording device. It's just not going to meet the needs of the police department, public disclosure requests or expectations. So this is where we will be coming to council to seek funding to get body-worn cameras, because officers will not be able to ask anybody about crimes at all unless we do these things. So we will need to do a proposal and write a policy, and then we have to obtain funding to get body-worn cameras for our officers to continue to do the investigations. And this bill, if it comes to the law, will be January of this year. So we don't really have a lot of time, 6-7 months to get this implemented. So next item that I have is House Bill 1140, Juvenile Access to Attorneys. This bill basically requires, if you have a juvenile that you are investigating for a crime, you will need to have the juvenile consult with an attorney. No longer can a juvenile waive their right to have access to an attorney. So every single juvenile that you arrest, if you want to ask questions, investigate, interrogate, all those things, you have to allow them to access to an attorney. And if you obtain any statements before they consult an attorney, then it's not admissible in court. Next one is House Bill 1088, Potential Impeachment Disclosure, also known as Brady List. this is something the policy is well established in King County. This is really nothing new to us. So there isn't really, we're already used to this practice, so it's not a really change for us. But this will be statewide and more uniform across the state. And I can tell you that we don't have any officer that need to be on the potential impeachment disclosure for Federal Way Police Department. However, if we have future incidences or we have a sustained finding of not being truthful or so forth, we will need to disclose it. We did have one officer on the Brady list, but the officer has since retired. So currently we don't have anyone. Senate Bill 5055, grievance arbitration panels. This is if you have an officer that's appealing discipline and it goes through all the way through the appealing process and it goes to an arbitrator, typical contracts, labor agreement contract says the city and the labor group must agree on who they're going to use as an arbitrator. There's a little bit of a problem with that is because in order to be reemployed as an arbitrator, you don't want to always have decisions on just on one side. Then you're unlikely to be hired again in the future. So what this bill does is that you have between 9 and 18 arbitrators that'll work for PERC. And then you basically, you have to pick, or whatever the process is for selecting the arbitrator, they're now bound by having continual work based on their decisions. So they're more free to really decide whether the decision to discipline by the chief is appropriate or not. Okay, so that's the new, basically in a nutshell, the new arbitration law. Then you have Senate Bill 5259, law enforcement data collection. Bottom line is any use of force will need to be reported, and they will collect that data and it will be accessible to the public. So the state is looking to hire a university to maybe take on this project and collect all use of force data from every police agency in the state of Washington. So that'll is one of the reform laws as well. So what questions, is there any questions before I move on to the next topic about police reform laws? I shared 12 of the new laws. To my knowledge, I mean, this is really new stuff that's coming out. The governor hasn't announced or signed any of them to my knowledge. The expectation is I think he is going to sign all of the laws, but we won't know until that happens. So you just received a pretty good summary of all the changes that's going to happen to your police department and throughout the state. And this is going to be a lot of work.
Chief, I see that I'll take Leander Kraft, Councilmember Kraft first because she's on the committee. Go ahead.
She's not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not
You're
on the
right.
committee.
But go ahead, Councilmember Kraft.
Thank you, Chair Kochmar. Chief, I understand for these bills with, for example, the body-worn camera and for diverting to treatment, since it's going to be a gross, or not a gross, but a simple misdemeanor for possession, there is hopefully going to be some money that the state is going to be providing to municipalities. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, my understanding is that the state allocated, the legislature allocated $88 million. So for treatment and so forth. Right now, just what we don't know is how is it going to shape out,
Right.
And if people can get into treatment, from law enforcement perspective, that's fine. If people are off the streets and they're receiving treatment, that's a good thing.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Honda.
Thank you. Chief, could you explain the definition of use of force, please? Because that seems to be an overarching word in most of these bills.
Yeah,
Force.
I would say use of force is, I think maybe you're thinking this maybe definition of like necessary, when is a use of force authorized, that type of thing. Relying on minimum use of force when affecting, arrests and so forth. When it comes to use of force, it's just broad terms of, officer having to use physical force, when it's warranted. And the new law basically says, use minimum, amount of force, exhaust all, I don't know if it says all, but exhaust all alternatives basically before using physical force, before it was a reasonable standard. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
So last year, the year before, Ryan Call explained use of force to me, and it was as simple as putting someone in handcuffs. Is that still what this means?
I wouldn't think just simply, no resistance, putting somebody in handcuffs. I wouldn't think that would be a use of force incident. But I would tell you that if somebody maybe this will help you. Somebody complains of pain. Let's say you make an arrest and somebody says, I'm hurting now. If there's any injury at all to the individual, and then we have a very clear definition of if you use this type of force, whether it's taser, baton, fist strikes, any of those things, firearm, clearly that is defined as, using, physical force.
Okay.
And maybe I could clarify that a little bit, Council President Honda. There's two different contexts. There's the law of seizing somebody, so the Fourth Amendment, basically taking someone into custody, and in that context, force can be anything. It's even glaring menacingly in a uniform with a gun on your hip. In this context, they're going to define it, I'm sure, and it's basically using force to overcome someone's will to get them into custody. So usually it's our threshold for our internal, how we've always done it is if someone complains of pain, that's when we start tracking it.
Okay. I understand that better because I was concerned about, so the definition, the courts will probably have to have a case in front of them before they decide what the definition of use of force is in the state.
I think a lot of this is going to turn on what the metrics are. So I think these will be defined events. So whatever they're tracking by this new agency, probably university that gets the job, that's going to be defined. So they're going to want to know how many times we, used OC or used a baton or a wrestling move or a leg sweep. I think they'll get very specific.
Okay. And then I have two other questions. One is the CJTC and the investigations. Who's going to pay for those investigations? Does each city need to pay for an investigation if they decide to investigate? And the audits, does each city also have to pay for the audits? Because, we have to pay for the audits of our financial books every year. So, and then my second question is, the Senate Bill 5476, the 2 warnings, and then the third, you could arrest someone if they had drugs on their person. So is that 2 warnings in the same city, or could someone have a warning in Auburn and it's put into a database, and then they come to our city and they get another warning? Or is it just based on how many times you're warned in each city?
In terms of CJTC, I don't believe there will be any cost to us for any sort of state audit at CJTC. They are allocating funding for CJTC to hire people. I'm sure they'll have investigators within that funding. I don't remember how many millions that they're getting for this, but bottom line is they're funded. I don't believe there will be any audit cost to us, like financial audit that's by the auditor's office. So that's my belief at this point. There may be more details that I'm not familiar with, but I don't think there's going to be cost to us on that. As far as the 2 warnings, I don't believe there will be a statewide system, database where you put in whether, somebody received a warning Tri-Cities and one in Auburn and one in Federal Way. I think it's going to be probably each city, keeping track of giving warnings. But we'll see. Time will tell. Maybe it'll get fine-tuned, but that's kind of my understanding is there is no statewide system to know if somebody's received a warning or not. But we'll have to come up with a system internally within the Federal Way Police Department to keep track of who has received those 2 warnings before you can do a physical arrest.
Okay. And I do have one more question. On the body-worn cameras, which I know that the Des Moines Police Department was going to start having a few of their officers wear cameras. They'd already decided to do that, I believe. But now it's going to be required that everyone wear cameras. So could we use some of the federal money that we're getting for those cameras? Do you know if that's an allowed use? Because we're going to have to not just have the cameras, we're going to have to hire an IT person and someone to keep records of the cameras, correct?
So I would tell you that with a date, we believe it'll be January 2022. The timeline, I don't think we're going to do a pilot project. I mean, we may start out with smaller. We got to move really fast. There isn't going to be a 6 months of, piloting the body-worn cameras. We got to basically, anybody who's working out in the field who conducts investigations, we just got to give them body-worn cameras. So we'll have to move pretty quickly on that. In terms of city positions, preliminarily, we're looking at a prosecutor position, an IT position, and public disclosure record coordinator person. So 3 FTEs. And I believe there's a way to, use federal funding to augment our ability to implement this program. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So are there any other questions by the council? I do have 2 from Councilmember Sevadossan, one of which is Chief Wong, for our CLIA training, can you explain how that happens after the police academy and how often we recertify?
Depending on what the training is, some training we provide annually, some training semi-annually, and there's other training involved. How we provide this training is our officers work a 4-10 schedule, work 4 days, off 3. So there's 1 day in which the day shift officers will overlap, swing shift officers will overlap, and night shift officers will overlap. So on those overlap days, about 8 months out of the year, there's some months we don't do training, but about 8-9 months out of the year, that's when we start doing our in-house training to meet the CLIA requirements for all the training requirements.
Okay, and then do we recertify annually or how often?
Things that we need to recertify for, yes. Whether it's access, CPR, any certification, yes.
Okay, thank you. And Chief, Councilmember Sevadossan had one more question, which is there's going to be a COMO interview tomorrow with several of our recruits at the at the Police Academy. Do you know what time that interview will air on COMO?
I don't know. I know they were going to shoot the video Wednesday, but I don't know. I don't think this is one of those stories that, there's timeline needs to be right away. So I would think it's coming out this week, but I don't know exactly when it's going to air. But when I see the story, I will send the link to all the council members.
Thank you, Chief. So then my question is, a lot of these bills are going to be effective, majority are going to be effective July 25th. One looks like it's July 1st, and another one January 1st, 2022. We have to hire 3 FTEs and get all this done by the effective. How on earth are you going to do that?
Well, and we got to pass our CLIA reaccreditation. So we are, I guess we're calm on the outside, like a duck in the water, but underneath we are scrambling down here. Everybody's working virtually overtime to meet the CLIA reaccreditation that's going to take place in August. There's tremendous amount of proof that we have to produce, prepare, and so forth. So we have that. And then, yes, this will be, but we're not alone with these reforms. This is statewide. So, there's all of the Valley, South King County chiefs and city attorneys. We're going to be meeting May 18th to talk about all these the laws and the steps that we need to take. So we're going to collaborate and cooperate with each other so that we could learn from each other, and we're going to move forward implementing all these new reforms. And we're going to
having been in the legislature, it's difficult for the legislature, I think, for some of the legislators to realize that one size doesn't fit all. And so we're a large city, but we don't have the personnel that City of Seattle and City of Tacoma have. So, to monitor all of it's going to be difficult for you.
We are very thin. Every department in our city, we are skeleton crew.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Council, are there any other questions? I think Chief Wong has a little bit more to discuss yet.
Oh, yes, I have more slides.
Okay.
Sure, Commissioner, I just have one question.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Bruce. So I can't see your hand. Go ahead.
That's okay. Chief, on the accreditation of CALIA, do you have how's that set in your department? Is there a board or a group that gets together that takes care of accreditation, number one? And then number two, if it's set that way, can you ask for an extension?
I don't know about an extension. I mean, we're moving to meet all the timeline. That shouldn't be a problem. We've never had a situation we considered asking for an extension. Our administrative commander serves as the accreditation manager, so he's really in charge of the accreditation process. We have a accreditation coordinator, and she also supervises our volunteer program. So right now she's spending obviously all her time pretty much with the accreditation process. And then we have various people within our organization. We have a lieutenant in our support services side, administrative officer. So they're all helping out, but we share the workload. There isn't few people working on it. Every commander's got to do their share of work for a CLIA accreditation. The chief has certain responsibilities, the deputy chief. So it's really throughout the organization.
Okay, so then again, is there ever done a request? Can a request for extension be done if needed?
I guess the answer to that is I don't know. I'm assuming if something critical occurred, sure, I'm sure they would work with us. But we've known for 4 years that we were, the state was coming. So every year you have little mini audits, and before our accreditation, we will bring in another accredited organization to come in and do a mock, kind of an assessment to see how ready we are.
Right. I get that, Chief. I'm just kind of trying to figure out a way, just in case, we have everything else coming up too, if that's a possibility for you. That's all.
I'll tell you what, as a police chief, I don't want an extension. We want to just get through this and get it done. This is that important to us.
I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brusso. Any other questions? Seeing none, Chief Wong, do you want to go ahead and finish?
Yeah, I'll talk about accountability in federal way. So right now, our civilian oversight is the mayor and council. What I would tell you is that not very much gets done in the police department without mayor having knowledge about what's going on. And we come to council for just about everything. Budget, obviously, is probably the biggest thing. But if we have a contract to sign, just like Valleycom service agreement tonight, or we're working with the law department for a new ordinance again tonight, we're regularly bringing things to council committee, whether it's FedRAC or public safety committee, such as this. So what I would tell you is that, we're a certain size city. I think the council members and the mayor has a pretty good idea of what's going on, what our community, the feedback that you receive, and based on that feedback from the entire community, you make decisions on a regular basis. But I would tell you, in terms of accountability, you are our civilian oversight, and we understand the important roles that elected officials play. And I think that we always work to partner and cooperate with elected officials. So I want to point that out. You are our civilian oversight. And then council committees. We have 2 primary council committees that we work with on a regular basis, creating agenda bills, staff report that comes to all of you on a regular basis. A Civil Service Commission, we're involved with them in the hiring process. They sign off on our eligibility list. They're involved. We give them reports regularly about where we are with staffing, hiring, and so forth. And we have to have their blessing to move on to hire people within our organization. I would tell you that we partner closely with the law department. Some of the things we do have, consequences in terms of liability. So whether it's a disciplinary matter or maybe a complaint, if a significant type of complaint, the law department is involved. And City Attorney Cole and I, we talk on a regular basis when issues come up. Human resources involved, particularly if it's harassment, sexual harassment, racial discrimination, those type of things, human resources involved. And I could tell you that all the years we worked here, we have very little complaints, whether it's bias-based complaint from the public or if it's even internal. So we have very low incidence of those type of complaints within our organization. I shared with you the new police reform laws. Clearly, this is the most police reform laws that's come through in, probably history of this state. And bottom line is, there is a lot more accountability that's going to go with policing moving forward. You're going to have other agencies involved, Attorney General's Office, Criminal Justice Training Commission, Governor's Office. There's going to be tremendous oversight of the police based on these new laws. We have the Chiefs Call Advisory Board. I have a couple slides or a few slides on this, so I won't go into great detail. Depending on the community needs, there's different types of advisory group or board or citizen oversight board, but we have what we have. And it's been around for 16 years, led by Dr. Bob McKenzie. And I'll share a little bit more with you on that. We now have a new diversity, equity, inclusion coordinator. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to bring our new coordinator to our Chiefs Call Advisory Group, so they have a full understanding of her role within our city. And I envision working closely with the DEI coordinator for the person to look into the police department, how we can partner, sharing information with the community, and maybe even make some changes based on feedback, because we're always looking to make changes and feedback within our organization. National accreditation. That's huge. We'll continue to do that. That's our vehicle that creates our culture within our organization. And then WCIAs, our insurance risk management, we're involved with them regularly. Criminal Justice Training Commission, I share with you our involvement with them. And then Law Enforcement Training Community Safety Act, Initiative 940. And we haven't even provided the 40-hour mandatory training that Initiative 940 requires because of COVID. And I think it's going to start coming around, but we haven't provided the mandatory 40-hour training as a state, not just our agency, but 40-hour de-escalation training. And that has not taken place yet. But that's overall accountability of our police department within our city. Okay, so before I go to Chief's Call, any questions on this particular slide? Okay. All right, so Chief's Call. I heard something.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. Chiefs Call Advisory Group. The police chief, I meet with this Chiefs Call group. They're non-police civilians representing different demographics throughout our city. There's 12 of us, including myself. 8 people are people of color. 4 are Black community members. And we meet on a quarterly basis. Basically, the advisory group provides feedback and insight, has tremendous influence with me. I have tremendous respect for Dr. McKenzie and some of the members that serve on the advisory board, and we have really healthy discussions. Last meeting, for example, we looked at automatic disqualifiers for police officers. We're really just re-looking at what disqualifies someone right from the get-go. And there was discussion that I know that took place in this meeting, and I know one of the members of the Chiefs Call spoke directly with Officer Hebner after his presentation on a following day or two to discuss further. So we make changes based on feedback from the chief's call. And we know that, I mentioned it before, in order for us to be successful, we got to engage with the public. And it's not all the things that we're involved in, but we are. For example, something new. We're African-American Black community meeting on a quarterly basis. I'm involved in that. I'm listening to the feedback that's being provided. We meet with it. We haven't met in a while because of COVID with the Korean community, but in the past, we met with various different communities, coffee with a cop, ice cream in the summer. We try to keep up with the fire department. We have to engage and earn the public's trust. We got to just be out there. And that's just part of community policing and part of building trust. And I kind of said this already. The elected officials are oversight for our city. I really believe that we're not such a big city that, mayor and the council have no control over policing, how policing is done in federal way. In Washington, there are 3 police agencies that have some formal of oversight, civilian oversight, and that's King County, Seattle, and Spokane. Now, Councilmember Johnson may have said other organizations have citizen oversight, or is it, advisory board of some sort or advisory committee? There is no one agency that's or keeps track of that. But right now, I'm only aware of one agency that has a police accountability oversight board, and that's Seattle. And they're currently under consent decree. That there was a DOJ investigation that determined that there was a pattern of using excessive force against people of color, and they're under a federal mandate. So they actually have the citizen oversight. The financial impact of civilian oversight and public safety. Listening to State Representative Johnson, that bill that was introduced in Olympia required 5% of the police department's budget to be used towards civilian oversight. That was statewide. Clearly, 5% of our police department budget would be, equivalent to probably, 12 to 15 officer positions. That's a significant hit to our city. I already told you, well, we already know our city's pretty thin. And then the bill was amended to you spend whatever money that you wanted to for the Citizen Oversight Board. But nevertheless, the bill did not go through. And, my thought, there's tremendous amount of work that's required to create a civilian oversight board. To do that, clearly there would be a financial impact. There would need to be staff time, probably staff position or 2, just to provide support to the civilian oversight board. So I just want to share that with you. My thought process, listening to State Representative Johnson, if it's going to be introduced again next year, with all the reforms that we have to implement, all the things that has to occur, we're only talking about 7 or 8 months. I'd rather have the state vet this issue and have a model policy for a statewide oversight board. Seems to make more sense to me than versus right now with everything that we need to do, purchasing body-worn cameras, to do this alone. It makes more sense to me to have this bill introduced again. And if the people of the state says, because we work for the people of the state says, yes, all the police departments here, more than 15 officers, need a civilian oversight board, then clearly we will do what the law requires. But that's, I hadn't planned on speaking that, but when State Representative Johnson spoke, it just dawned on me, we're 7 months out. Let's wait 7 months. Federal Way, Chiefs Call Advisory Group has been in existence more than 16 years within our city. And even though these people on the advisory board aren't appointed by the council, are not selected by the police chief. This happened where primarily when it started, it was completely African-American community members that started meeting with the police chief. And then after a while, it did stop with the previous chief for a while. And when I became chief, I reached out to Dr. McKenzie to say, are you still interested in doing this? Because I wanted to meet with community members. And he said, yes. So we've been doing this. I don't pick the oversight, advisory individuals. Dr. McKenzie does. And when this issue came up in 2018, we did fine tune it to where if you want to join this advisory group, just reach out to Dr. McKenzie. It's on the police department's website, and it describes a history of our program and how to join this particular group. So our advisory group looks different than probably other advisory group, but nevertheless, once the group is formed, how it's formed is different. But this particular group, we have respectable community members on this board. If you want to see a list of who's on this board, I will email it to you. Just need to let me know. But that's how our advisory board works in our community. And this is our purpose statement. And Dr. Bob McKenzie is the leader. He calls the meeting. I'm just an invitee. I come and then I communicate with him on, he asks the group if there's any particular topic they want to discuss. And when they do, I prepare materials. He sets the agenda and we present the material. So moving forward, obviously we have all these state police reform laws and the necessary training that needs to occur within our agency. Implement a body-worn camera program, and we are reaching out to the labor groups to start implementing or coming up with a plan to do this. So that's all in the works right now. Recruit and hire the right people within our organization. Our department now is more diverse than ever before, and we have more female officers than we've ever had before as well. Provide continual education and training, outreach to diverse communities. We'll continue to do that. Minimum reliance of physical force, maintain our national accreditation. And then obviously we have to deal with complex social issues. I know the police is the focus, but there are a lot of other social issues we need to deal with, and we're going to continue to work with other disciplines. And whenever we need to be involved or we're invited to participate, we're going to be there for our community. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Chief Wong, for your excellent presentation. Council members, are there any questions? If you have any, please speak up. Okay, now I can see everybody. I see Council President Honda.
Councilmember Kraft's hand was up before I put
there
my
it is.
hand up.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Kraft.
Thank you, Chair Kochmar. Thank you, Council President Honda. Thank you, Chief, for this presentation and the time you took into putting together the information. I appreciate it. Do you know, for the Chief's call, I know that you're invited to those meetings, but are there any historical minutes that are taken for those meetings or anything that the public could access to see what has already been discussed?
Well, I have, we have agendas and things we talk about, documents, but no, there's no minutes. And sometimes the format is, I think people are a lot more free to just discuss and talk things, but we haven't kept minutes, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Council President Honda.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief, for putting all this information together. I know it was a lot of work, and I appreciate the time you used to do that. When you talk about accountability and you talk about the mayor and the council, going back to what you talked about before with some of the new requirements, if there is an investigation of the CJTC did an investigation here in Federal Way, would they need to ask for the council and mayor's approval, and would they report to the council and mayor, or who would they report their investigation to?
The law says they may investigate. They would not need council or mayor approval. They have sole authority to decide what they're going to investigate. Obviously, we will need to cooperate with them because we need to provide, all the documents and maybe the question of, interviews and things like that. I don't think it's all been worked out. This is, a law that's been created, and I don't know the details. The bottom line is, yes, they have the authority to come in and investigate if something they feel that they need to come and do that.
do they report back to us?
Once the investigation is done, the information would be, available to the public. So, yes, I mean, they would not necessarily report to you, but they would provide a report, and we would provide that to you.
Okay, thank you.
And okay. Was there a first question on elected officials? Okay.
No, it was just if they would need our approval to do an investigation.
No, they would not.
Thanks.
Chief Wong, do you want to talk any about the Como 4 interview tomorrow with our 2 police recruits at the police academy?
Yeah, they're actually going to do a story about how they provide training to their recruits. And it's really about reality-based training, lifelike training. They put them in stressful situations, and that way you have a better outcome. Generally, it's one thing to say, here's what you need to do and so forth type of training, but actually put them into a stressful training situation. And I'm really proud of the 2 recruits that they're going to interview. She'll be one of our, Black female officers. She'll be our second Black female officer that's going through. And we must be at 8 or 9 Black officers now. I know that still doesn't match up to our community population of Black community, but considering at some point we had 2, Black officers within our agency, we believe that we've been really moving towards, finding qualified applicants. And I also want to share with you our civilian operations manager. She's our highest ranking civilian person. She's part of our command staff, is also, African American. And we have a lieutenant who's also African American. So what I'm telling you is that our department has evolved, and our diversity is, we have a lot more diversity than we have in the past. We made a conscious effort to find, recruits. We've done local recruiting. In fact, our administrative officer, Officer Hebner, is in contact with the local pastor here, Black Church, and we're looking for ways to find more recruits, people of color, to apply and to have them apply with our agency. So those efforts are continuing.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you so much, Chair Coach Mar. Chief, thank you for all your efforts. I think all of us, I certainly don't want to speak for anybody, but I suspect that all of us are incredibly grateful for the work that you do each and every single day, and really the men and women that serve in our police department. So thank you for that. And of course, that's an important statement to make now, especially it being a National Police Week. I would recommend, you've heard me saying this, so this really isn't anything new, but, people are wanting to know more and more and more of what's going on inside the police department because of our times that we live in. And so that article, that news story that's going to be done, I urge you to put that on your department's Facebook page and let people know of what's actually happening. What does training look like? Because I think overall, Chief, if the more the people know, I think that continues to put faith and confidence and in our police department and the people's police department. So obviously, comments only here, and there's a lot of changes that are coming across. And again, we're police departments all over the state, all over the country, they just have to evolve because times change, unfortunately. And I see some of these changes as definitely a challenge and hard hitting. But I also see these challenges. I also see these changes as an opportunity for proactiveness and for protection, quite frankly. And so, I'm appreciative that you guys are taking the time to implement those. Obviously, state laws, they have to be. I think, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard you talk about CALIA, accreditation, and it's important. I think I may make a new rule that every time I hear you talking about, I'm going to put $5 in my son's bank account, and we'll see where we get with that. But it's really important that we obviously hear it, because Chief, people, I don't think people know what that is. And I know you've talked about it till you're blue in your face, and I know you've said it so many times, but I just wonder if there's ways to really kind of give an insight of what is it through various media outlets. But I'm not talking about the federal mirror, Chief. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about maybe videos, to illustrate and to bring it to life of what does it mean. I think, Chief, you see it directly, people sharing the departments on other platforms, social platforms, to get that word out. So people are trying to step up and get that word out of what is what's happening in our PD, in the People's Police Department. Just comments there. I look forward to talking more about the Chief's call. I do look forward to continuing to support the PD but continue to move it in a period. Continue to move it towards proactiveness. And I think the other comment I will say that I don't want to forget is I'm absolutely grateful that you have been much more intimate and proactive in hiring locally. You didn't talk about that, Chief, but you have been hiring locally, and obviously been focused on diversifying the police force. And I think it's really important that the kids I teach, that I spend on a weekly basis, can be able to look up to their police department, to their police officer, and say, yes, that can be me because that's a Native American and I'm a Native American, or that can be me because I'm Bulgarian and that police officer is Bulgarian, or a woman, or so on. You get what I'm saying? So I think there's just a lot of work. Change is uncomfortable. You're a leader. I know right behind you have hundreds of books on change and leadership, and I just look forward to those continued conversations with you, but also with the men and women that serve, so that we can get buy-in as we continue to build the best police department that's focused on trust, that's focused on pride from all walks of life in our community. Thank you so much, Chair Kochmar.
I will, Councilmember Moore, as we go through the accreditation process, there's community involvement portion, and when we're reaccredited, we will definitely put up videos, and all our cars say nationally accredited. I know people see that and they ask questions about that. So yes, we will definitely get the word out about that. And by the way, I only heard half the things you said when Councilmember Kraft brought out her baby. I'm sorry, I lost my focus there. She's just so adorable.
But I should have brought my kid out too then.
If I could add,
Maya is very cute. Yes.
Committee Chair, if I could just say,
go ahead.
I want to tell you right now, the officers have incredibly difficult and challenging job, and it's a dangerous work. And what they need right now, there's so much police reform, and they are under the microscope. What they really need is city leaders to say, you have a difficult job, we support you. And I can tell you right now, there's no officer there's going to be accountability. That's not going to be, that's going to happen in the Federal Way Police Department. What they really want is they want to know that they're supported by their leaders. And the steps that we take moving forward on this issue right now, it could have detrimental impact to the morale of the agency. And I was actually, when I heard State Representative Johnson speak that this is going to be a state thing, let the state do the heavy lifting. We don't need to do the heavy lifting when we got all these things going on. And if we go down this path, I'm going to be honest with you, there are councils and cities that say, hey, if your city leadership doesn't support you, come work for us. And our officers, they're nationally credited officers with high level of training. If they put in applications anywhere, they're going to be competitive. And I'm telling you as a police chief, if we don't make the right decisions on these issues, I will have a hard time retaining, hiring, and that has a direct correlation to public safety. When officers don't feel that there's a balance, we see it in big metropolitan cities throughout the country, that it impacts crime and public safety. So that is we should not discourage our officers from doing good police work that protects our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Wang. We know how difficult your job is, and the job of all our police officers. And please express our appreciation for what they do every day on our behalf. Council members, are there any other questions of Chief Wang? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
We're moving on. Thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the agenda, for the good of the order? Seeing none, our next meeting will be June 8th at 5 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you so much. It is now 6:55 p.m. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.